In this video, you're going to learn 5 ways to train up young worship leaders in your church. Coming up. Hey everyone, Spencer here from leadingworshipwell.com, your daily dose of practical worship leading tips. If you want to find those tips, head over to Instagram or Facebook at Leading Worship Well, where I'm posting new worship leading tips, just like the ones I'm about to share every single day. But you're here on YouTube, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button down below, and let's get into it, because today we're talking about 5 ways to train up young worship leaders in your church. And this is actually the second part of a video that I put out last week that you can check out right here, where I talked about 5 reasons that you should be training up young worship leaders in your church. So if you aren't convinced that that's something that you should be doing yet, go watch that video and hopefully you'll be convinced by the end of it. But I'm assuming now that you have determined that this is indeed important, that it's important to train up young worship leaders in the church for the 5 reasons that I shared in last week's video. So now the question is, okay, I know it's important. I know that I should be doing it, but how do I actually do it? What are some practical steps that I can take to find and develop young worship leaders in my church? And that's what today's video is all about. So I want to share with you these 5 ways that you can train up young worship leaders in your church. And the first one is this, very practical. Number 1, give them music lessons. Teach them how to play an instrument. And I know this might seem obvious, but I think it's perhaps so obvious that sometimes we skip over it. For someone to lead musical worship in your church, they have to know music, whether that's vocals or guitar or piano or drums or bass, whatever it is, they actually have to know how to play an instrument. And maybe there are already people in your church or young leaders in your church who kind of play an instrument. I know I've had these conversations 100 times, not 100 times, I wish 100 times, but like 10 or 15 times in the past 2 years, where I'm talking to a student and they're like, hey, I really like your guitar playing on Sunday. And I say, thanks. And then I say, do you play guitar? And they're like, yeah, well, I kind of mess around with it a little bit. And the thing that I always say is, let's get together, because I want to develop that skill. If you've got an interest in something, we can develop that. Now, this is just the musical side of leading worship. Obviously, there's a spiritual component too. But hopefully, the young students, the young potential leaders in your church are getting that spiritual side from all of the other aspects in your church, from Sunday mornings to youth groups to whatever else you have going on in your church. But you, as somebody who knows how to play a musical instrument or has some musical ability, you are leading musical worship on Sunday, after all, you can take the initiative upon yourself to show them the musical side of leading worship, and they have to know how to play an instrument. So just walk up to a student, if you hear that they play an instrument, and offer. You don't even have to call it giving lessons at first. Just say, hey, do you want to get together and just jam? That's what I say. We should get together and jam sometime. And they probably don't know enough to jam, but in those moments, it's a more relaxed environment. Lessons to me says like, oh crap, I gotta come prepared, and you do want them to come prepared eventually, but just that initial meeting, you just want them to be relaxed, and you want to show them what you know. And that takes time. That might take a year or 2 years or however long, but in the process, you're developing the musical side of leading musical worship. So that's the first way. Consider giving people music lessons. Number 2 is to have your worship team, other members on your worship team, mentor these students. Because this responsibility of teaching people doesn't have to just fall solely on your shoulders. That's called addition. When everything comes through you and you are the one who's teaching everyone, you're just adding one person here, one person there, one person there. But we want to multiply and make it exponential, where we have spent our time as leaders of the team, or maybe you're just on a worship team, but you are interacting with the other people around you. You want to spend your time pouring into them, who in turn pour into other people, who hopefully in turn pour into other people. So if a student comes up to you and they say they play the bass, but you play keyboard or you sing, and you don't know how to play the bass and you don't know how to develop them musically, but you have a bass player on your team, connect those two people together and let your worship team know that this is part of the responsibility of serving on the worship team. If you want to raise the expectation of your worship team volunteers, members, then let them know that it's not just about showing up on Sunday morning and playing a few songs. We've already raised that standard before. I've talked about this before on here, but we want to raise it to, okay, we're not just playing songs, we're leading worship, and that leads into other things, but also we want to be developing other people to lead worship alongside us so that we don't have to lead every week, and in the process, we're leading the church. We're building the church and equipping them for the future. So get your other worship team members involved and connect these people that you find with them. That's how multiplication happens. We don't want to just be adding people to the team. We want to be multiplying the people that we are training. Tip number 3, or way number 3, that you can train up young worship leaders is to let them lead in your church's youth group. This is like the standard place to get young worship leaders to connect to leading worshiping. And there's really 2 reasons for this. And the first reason is that it gives them a safe space, quote unquote, to develop their skills. It allows them to lead without all of the added pressure that a Sunday morning brings. And we'll cover that in the next tip because all these tips tie in together. But just know that it gives them a safe entry point where they aren't just showing up on a Sunday morning and leading every song. The second reason that you should be letting the youth or the students lead other students in your youth group is that peers connect better with other people, or like people who are the same age connect better. It's hard for me as a 26-year-old to lead, and this happened before, to lead like 6th graders. I mean, I can do it, and I'm able to, but whenever you get people who are the same age connecting with other people of the same age, they're able to connect on a deeper and different level because they know the language, they know what resonates because they are that person. They are a peer of that person. And I discovered that whenever I led worship at a Christian school. I was on staff in the IT department, and I led worship at chapel for middle school chapel. That's like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And it was just me. And I'd lead worship, and it was fine. Like I know how to lead worship, so I could lead worship. But I saw a huge difference between that middle school chapel where it was just me. I was 24 back then, leading 6th through 8th graders. There was a huge difference between that and then whenever high school chapel came around and there were high schoolers on the high school chapel worship team leading other high schoolers in this school. And they were able to connect on a much deeper level just because they were their peers. They were the same age. They knew how to talk in a way that resonated with them better. So that's why you should be allowing these young worship leaders to lead in a youth group. Way number 4, and this connects to the last point, is that you should give them safe spaces to lead. And I talked about that in the last point, but there's more safe spaces than just leading worship at a youth group. And I view this in terms of pushing people into varying degrees of uncomfortability. So maybe you start off, and anytime they lead worship for the first time, it's going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be nervous, but you can give them steps to take. So by the time that they're leading an entire service on Sunday at some point in the future, they've already built the fundamental skills, and they might still be a little bit nervous because they haven't done that specific thing before, but they've at least led worship in some context before. So here are a couple sort of safe spaces that you can give these young worship leaders a chance to lead in. And the first is worship rehearsal. So have them come to your worship rehearsal and lead your worship team in worship. And that allows your worship team the opportunity to worship, and they don't have to focus on anything because they're usually the ones leading worship. So this is a great opportunity to give them a chance to worship. But number two, they're also like they're understanding. They know that this person is new. This is the first time they've done this, so they might be nervous and act uncomfortable while they're leading people. They might make mistakes, but your worship team is okay with that. Not that people aren't okay with that on a Sunday morning, but it's just a little bit of a safer environment for that young worship leader to start leading worship. So I'd have them do it, lead worship at a worship rehearsal a couple times, and then maybe they can lead at a small group, and that's sort of the next step. Now we're out of the safety of the other members of the worship team who they probably have a connection to, and now we're out in the church in a small environment, in a small group, leading people in worship, another safe space. Take it to the next level. Maybe they're leading at youth group now, and they're leading their peers in worship. It's still a smaller setting than a Sunday morning. You're probably doing less songs there, so there's not as much to learn musically. Another safe space to lead. Eventually, let them lead with you on a Sunday morning, and maybe they aren't singing a song yet. Maybe they're just playing along in the background on the back of the stage, but you're letting them dip their toe in the water of playing on a Sunday morning, and then eventually you give them a song to lead. And now there's another safe space for them to lead. See how they're building these skills all the way up until eventually they'll be able to lead an entire service on Sunday. That's really the process that you need to go through to train up young worship leaders in your church. So give them safe spaces to lead, but safe doesn't always mean extremely comfortable. Allow them to experience varying degrees of uncomfortability as they work their way up to eventually being able to lead completely by themselves. And number 5, and this goes along with number 4, is to give them real responsibility. I see it too often, and I know I've done it before. You're like, okay, this person's still learning, so I don't really want to give them real responsibility, so I'll just kind of put them in the background. One of the prime examples of this that I can think of is when people put young worship leaders on stage, but they don't have their instrument plugged in, or they have it turned down the whole way. And I understand that to some degree. You know, they're getting them used to leading on stage, but the thing is, eventually you're like 6 months in and this person hasn't ever been turned up in the mix, and they have no real responsibility. Like, they aren't stupid. They're going to recognize that, and then they're going to be like, well, I don't really have to prepare because nobody's hearing me on Sunday. I'm just standing up here strumming. So don't let it get to that point. If you want to do that for like a week or two so they can get comfortable, that's fine. But eventually you need to give them real responsibility, because that allows them to rise to the occasion of preparing for that real responsibility. And that real responsibility, what do I mean by that? Well, it's kind of what we talked about in the last point. Have them lead a song at your worship team rehearsal. That's real responsibility. Eventually have them lead a song in your church on a Sunday morning. That's a real responsibility. Like, they need to prepare for that, and that pushes them past the point of, okay, I'm just going to sit in the background and I'm not really doing anything important, so I don't really need to prepare. But now, like, they are the ones leading a song. They need to prepare. That is a real responsibility. And eventually that real responsibility turns into leading an entire Sunday morning. And I'm not saying that this is like a 3-month process, all right? That process, especially with younger leaders who, remember, aren't just developing musically, but they're also developing spiritually, that's a long process. That could be a year or 2 years until that happens. And I think of a very specific example in my church where we have a young student on our worship team, and she started out and she was just singing background vocals. I don't even know. I think we had another female singer at the time, so this young student was just sort of in the background on stage, but she was singing. She was turned up in the mix, like people could hear her. Eventually she came to the front of the stage, another point of like pushing people to the uncomfortable. Now you're up in front of the stage, you aren't in the background, still singing background vocals though and harmonies. And then eventually we gave her a song and she crushed it. So we were like, okay, well, now you're going to lead another song on Sunday, and so on and so forth until now she's leading like 3 songs on some Sundays out of the 6 songs that we do. Like, that is the process of training up young worship leaders. It doesn't happen instantly. Sometimes you have to start at ground zero and you have to teach them the instrument and then get them plugged in on the worship team and then keep giving them these opportunities until they can eventually lead completely by themselves. So those were 5 ways to train up young worship leaders in your church. That's how you can pour in to other people. But if you want to pour into yourself, I put together a free audio training for you called 5 Tips to Instantly Improve Your Worship Leading. And in this audio training, I share 5 simple tips that will instantly improve your worship leading. They're pretty easy, but a lot of people miss them. So you just have to know them and make the conscious effort to decide to do them. If you want that training, you can head over to leadingworshipwell.com, or there's a link in the description below. Thanks so much for joining me today. Once again, my name is Spencer Cormany from leadingworshipwell.com, and I'll catch you in the next one. Keep leading worship well, guys. See ya.